played it just a little bit. It does take a little while. There's a lot of decisions back and forth.
It's like you're playing Limited with the best Limited decks you've ever had.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, there's GTAs, there's Batter Skulls, there's Stoneforge Mystics, there's a bunch of stuff running around over there.
There's Combat, and we're playing Legacy.
I love Combat. Sign me up. I know you're pretty happy about this.
I don't even really get how it works. It's creatures have power, and that you use that to determine how fast their clock is, right? That's all you care.
That's my wheelhouse personally. For you, I know you just want to kill your opponent as quickly as possible and not interact.
What I know is a 3/3 will kill me in 7 hits, so I have to win before then.
So you get 7 whole turns.
Yeah, 3/3s and 3/1s are the same card.
Here's a Gataxian Probe to start things off for Caleb. We'll take a look at Danny's hand, and Danny's going to show a pretty strong hand here. You got a Force of Will, 2 copies of Spell. Okay, 3 copies of Spell Pierce.
This hand is so good against Storm.
A Brainstorm, a Ponder, and just a Tropical Island. Now, the one thing he's missing in Matthias is the clock.
Yeah, so he doesn't have a clock. Now, he does have the Ponder. I mean, this hand is far too good to even consider mulliganing in the matchup. You have the turn 1 kill covered with Force of Will, and if we start getting into a fair game where Caleb starts to try to maybe turn 2 or turn 3, triple Spell Pierce is really horrendous to get around. Now, there's one thing, is that, remember, we got to check for cards like Cabal Therapy, which there are 3 of in Caleb's list. If Caleb, say, had to turn 1 Therapy, Danny would actually have to Force of Will it here.
Likely Force of Will removing a Spell Pierce is what we would see from Danny. Now,
right.
As far as Danny and his permission is concerned, we're going to watch Caleb cast some sort of cantrip here. It'll be a preordain. He's got Dazes, Force of Will, Spell Pierces, Stifles, all 4 ofs here this weekend in his main deck. And players who have access to each other's deck list the entire way throughout the tournament, so none of this is going to come as a surprise to either player. Though Danny's opening hand here, outside of missing a Nimble Mongoose or Delver Secrets, it's a beautiful looking hand.
2 rituals for Caleb. He selected one of them. Now, this is going to be interesting to see how Caleb plays it. So typically in game 1s, you go heavy on rituals because the clock is what matters. But now that he has this information from Danny's hand, you know, he needs to reprioritize. If he wants to take rituals, he needs so much mana that he can go over the top of this permission. You know, say Danny has 2 lands. Caleb will need +4 on mana to get through it. That's huge.
Looks like Dark Petition the draw step here for Caleb.
Yeah, I think he has the Cabal Therapy. Now, the question will be, does he have a black source for it?
Oh, I think that answers your question. He's just going to pass the turn back here. Jessup will draw.
Yeah. Caleb does have a Brainstorm and a Ponder. What he's doing here is he's actually... So it's an interesting sequencing of Brainstorm. Normally you don't want an end-step Brainstorm, but he's actually... Storm gets to play different rules with cantripping because they don't really care about a lot of traditional things. He's end-stepping the Brainstorm to hope to overload Spell Pierces. Say Caleb goes for an end-step Brainstorm. Okay, he lost some value in the cantrip, but if you're Danny, do you really want to Spell Pierce this? That's 1 less Spell Pierce you get on the following turn. It's risky.
For Danny now, you saw him just play a Tropical Island on turn 1 and pass the turn back. We know he's got a Ponder in his hand. Everybody knows that. You do at home. Caleb knows in the middle of the match. But he wanted to leave Spell Pierce up, and now he's going to cast a Ponder and try to find a blue source of mana. Maybe it'll leave Spell Pierce and Brainstorm and all that other stuff up moving forward. For Caleb, he's going to play his Brainstorm now in response to the Ponder.
Danny has a shields down moment here. He has no second land. Caleb knows about this. Well, his second land's a Wasteland. He has no second blue mana. If Danny misses on mana here, just completely, he's most likely going to die on the next turn.
It could get very bad for him. Caleb's going to resolve his Brainstorm. Lion's Eye Diamond, Underground Sea, among the cards that have been drawn here.
If Danny doesn't have a blue mana up, Caleb has more than enough things in play to win here. He can Therapy away the Force of Will, and then simply win.
Brainstorm is done resolving. Now the Ponder will resolve here for Jessup. He'll take a look at the top couple of cards. The first card immediately, a Tropical Island.
And it's kind of a poison pill Tropical Island here too. If you're Danny, you have to take the blue. It's not even a question. But the other cards he has to keep are a Forked Bolt and a 4th Spell Pierce, which are pretty bad. He's looking for a clock. And he doesn't have one. Neither of those provided. I mean, Forked Bolt is just bad here, and second Spell Pierce is not much better.
Yeah, in a perfect world, the land that he finds there is a fetch land. Not
that would be beautiful.
Yeah, not an actual tropical or volcanic, so that he can fetch away the nonsense from the Ponder. Now, I'm with you. I think he has to keep because he needs the land to be able to turn on Spell Pierce and Brainstorm and everything else that's going on in his hand.
But he's not happy about it.
Yep. The next draw steps are not particularly good. There is the Tropical Island pass the turn back over to Scherer.
And this highlights one of the problems when you said there was no clock. You know, looking at those opening hands, you thought this was a great game for Danny, but, you know, were I to look at this, I would not be surprised to see Caleb walk away with this game 1. He's got all the time in the world.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's how much time he's being afforded right now. No Nimble Mongoose or Delver of Secrets out there, so he has the time to cantrip around, find some discards, sculpt a perfect hand, as here's an aggressive use of Spell Pierce, which I like because you got to get that card out of your hand.
Well, I like it from both sides. I like it from Danny. I also like Caleb's play in that I think he wanted that to get pierced because now he can therapy away the remaining 2.
Or this will get a Force of Will.
Both are great.
Yeah. Either way, I think Caleb is happy because what Caleb has to do here is he's got to get through this shield of counterspells. Once he gets through it, then, he's got free reign to do his thing. But given that he knows what's in Danny's hand, he's got no choice. Let's work our way through this wall of counter magic.
So whether or not he goes for the Force of Will or the 2 Spell Pierces depends on what kind of combo he's trying to set up. So if he just is going for a lot of mana, for the all mana play, then he wants to take the Pierces. If he's going for an ad nauseum, he'll need to take the Force of Will.
Spell Pierce down. Therapy does resolve. So Caleb will write down the contents of Jessup's hand, a Ponder, a Brainstorm, a Wasteland, and a Force of Will. And now he'll just pass the turn back. Now, we know that Danny's going to be drawing a 4 Spell Pierce here. Has no interest in drawing a Fork Bolt, obviously. Now he's going to Ponder.
Might shuffle away that Forked Bolt. What's good on Danny's side is he'll actually get to, if he wants to, Wasteland away that Underground Sea. I believe Caleb is sitting on a copy of Duress, so Danny's going to want to do that quickly.
Scalding Tarn, Daze, the other cards found along with Fork Bolt there. Let's see if Danny will keep. And it looks like he will. Picked up a copy of Daze. There's Wasteland. Fire away, take care of the Underground Sea. There goes the black source of mana there for Caleb. He'll untap and take a draw. Picked up a copy of Dark Petition, and now all he can do is pass the turn back. Weird little game we're playing here because Caleb is having some mana issues and Danny is having some issues actually finding some type of pressure as he'll now Brainstorm. Forked Bolt, Stifle, and a Ponder.
Main deck Stifles are really one of the reasons I think that you hit it on the nail on the head and you said this is slightly in Temur Delver's favor. When you look at decks like Sultai Delver or Grixis Delver, it's a pretty even matchup between the two, but Temur's probably the one you don't want to see when you're on the combo side.
Yeah. And Temur does bring a lot to the table and even more on the sideboard a lot of the time. But again, the strength of Storm, its power level. The power level of the deck is so they can kill you on turn 1.
Yes, and it's not a Belcher fragile kind of turn 1 kill. It's a turn 1 combo deck with a lot of teeth to it.
Yeah. It's scary to play against. Scalding Tarn, in combination with Brainstorm, always beautiful. And Jessup will search up a volcanic island now, shuffle away the garbage. But again, no Delver, no Tarmogoyf, no Nimble Mongoose yet. That's the missing piece to the puzzle right now for Jessup.
Yeah, he has Caleb at a healthy 17. And if Danny actually wants to play this game of, right now he's doing a great impression of just a pure control deck. And if he wants to play that, there are risks involved.
Well, this Ponder did net the creatures. There's a Nimble Mongoose and 2 copies of Tarmogoyf. So Jessup has found what he's been missing, which is a creature. You see the hand right now, Force of Will, Daze, and Spell Pierce. That's the permission. And that's how Temur Delver gets to work.
So I think what he's wondering here is if he plays Nimble Mongoose, will a Force plus a Daze be enough to survive Caleb top decking a black source? Can he actually tap out here?
Nimble Mongoose the draw. And he is going to tap out.
Big draw here from Caleb. If he hits the black mana, things could get dicey. But even then, Danny's kept a great hand.
Well, it is a redraw here with Gataxian Probe.
Now he knows.
Yeah, Danny will show the grip of 4 Spell Pierce and Daze and says, this is what you have to work your way through. You've already got through 3 Spell Pierces. Can you get through a 4th along with this other stuff?
It's a rough trio to work through for any Storm player.
Dark Ritual was the draw off of Gataxian Probe, and he'll just have to pass the turn back over to Jessup.
That might be the closing of the window here.
Yeah, Nimble Mongoose already a 3/3, as Danny's done a lot of cantripping, has awesome cards to discard.
If Caleb can assemble a combo turn, this is getting very rough for ad nauseum now.
Polluted Delta the draw.
Right, so he gets to play. There is a Spell Pierce he has to work through now, though, because he knows perfect information on Danny's hand. He knows that there's still really only 2 counterspells he's working through. There's no way to play that Force of Will without pitching another counterspell to it. Now, there are a good pair of counterspells that he has to work with.
He'll go get a basic Swamp here off the Delta. Scherer down to 11. Tarmogoyf a 3-power creature, same with the Mongoose. It's a turn 2 clock. Excuse me, a 2-turn clock.
He has a lot of rituals available, however. He knows he has to play through a Force of Will. So at some point, we're going to see this Duress get fired off. But it'll be interesting to see him sequence this.
He's going to start with Dark Ritual.
Where does Danny... I mean, the temptation here is that Danny wants to fire off the Spell Pierce immediately.
Mm-hmm. And this is what makes this so interesting, too, is that if you are a player who plays Delver strategies, be it Teamer, Jeskai, Grixis, whatever, when do you pick your spots against Storm with your counter magic?
So Spell Pierce is in risk of being dead rather quickly. So this isn't an unreasonable spot to use it. Danny, the way Danny needs to think about this is he has Caleb dead in 2 turns. So a Pierce here means that Danny will swing and Caleb will have to win next turn, and Caleb will have to win through the 1 remaining Force of Will in Danny's hand. But Danny's drawing Tarmogoyf. So Daze is no longer a card. It's just a Force of Will, and Caleb knows it.
Caleb's down to 5. Big draw here. Let's see what he found. A copy of Brainstorm. I think he'll start there, and he will. Let's see if this resolves.
Oh, wow. Danny's thinking of forcing it.
And what's interesting here is that if he does force the Brainstorm, Caleb will lose. I do not believe he has Dark Ritual in his hand. I know he's got Cabal Ritual in his hand, but Danny has no idea what's in Caleb's hand. And Caleb knows exactly what's in Danny's hand.
This is really close. I don't believe that Caleb has much to work off of here. I mean, Lotus Petal is where it's going to start. Plus land. This is huge.
What he needed was more mana sources.
And he got 2.
He might be able to go now.
And it's really relevant that 2 isn't 1. Now, he knows he's playing around a Force of Will. That's still the difficulty for Caleb. And he might have needed something even better. I think he needed 2 petals and a land.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because he hasn't played a land yet for this turn, and he can play a petal, so that'll give him access to 3 mana. He can lead off with Cabal. He can lead off with a discard spell.
Oh, right. So, no, you're absolutely right. He hasn't played the land for the turn.
Yeah.
So he can get up to 3. So he can duress here. He can duress to force the force to force action on the Force of Will.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the hand empty, he can go for it.
Now, again, everything's got to line up correctly in his hand as he's going to start things off with the Bloodstained Mire. So we will watch these events unfold, because if they do not work out, he's dead. So it's this turn as he sacrifices the Bloodstained Mire and goes to 4.
Wow, and that's a situation where if Danny could have forced the Brainstorm, and then he's only daring Caleb to have drawn a land for the turn. And I think if we look back on it, forcing the Brainstorm, I believe it strands Caleb, but that's a tough read.
Yeah. Here's Duress.
And now Danny knows there's just not much he can do about Duress. What he could do is he could daze it to force Caleb to play around Force plus blue card, but the problem is that Caleb can't beat Force plus blue card, so there's no reason.
Yeah. Now, if I'm Danny, I like casting Daze here to try to represent something. If you just lay your hand on the table, it's so easy for Caleb to play around. His hand right now is Force of Will, Daze, and Tarmogoyf. Caleb just takes the Daze with the Duress. Force of Will can't be cast. Tarmogoyf doesn't matter, and then it's showtime.
So there's another way to look at this, which is that Force of Willing, doing anything here doesn't really accomplish much. So I think either you Daze it, and then hope that Caleb pays a mana, or you do nothing and try to not add to Caleb's Storm.
Yeah, I think those are the 2 routes that you can go. Of the 2, and I'm not sure one is better than the other, if I'm in Danny's seat right now, I'm casting Daze and trying to represent a card as strong as I can, that what I drew was a blue card to go along with the Force of Will. Now, obviously, that's not the truth. He's got a Tarmogoyf in his hand, but I think that gives you the best opportunity to make your opponent make a mistake, because that's all you can do right now is you need Caleb to screw up.
Well, he's going to make the line. Here's a hard cast Daze. So Caleb now has to decide, can he pay and win? Now, I don't think Caleb can.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, Caleb may just let this get countered.
And it does get countered.
And if that's the situation, Danny definitely just added 1 to Caleb's Storm.
Now, we'll see if that matters, as here's a Lotus Petal.
This is spell 4.
There's Cabal Ritual. Threshold certainly online. That'll be 5 black in the mana pool. You see Caleb's going to get his little toys out here.
You saw a shrug on his side where he was pretty happy to not see, just asked, well, did you draw the blue card? And now he knows.
Yep. It appears as though he is clear for takeoff. 5 spells played this turn.
All right, there was a Gitaxian Probe to start off the turn. You're absolutely right.
There's a Lion's Eye Diamond.
Caleb knows he has this. The last one's real good.
Yeah, Infernal Tutor in combination with Lion's Eye Diamond. You're going to hold priority, crack the Lion's Eye Diamond, I believe is what we'll see Caleb do here, and that's exactly what will happen. And now the only question is, what's the route to go for the W? Assuming that his graveyard will cooperate, I think we're going to see a Past in Flames kill.
Yeah, so if you get Past in Flames here, you can cast a Past in Flames, you can flash back enough rituals out of your graveyard that it's worth it. Then you flash back the Infernal Tutor, go get an Tendrils of Agony, and win the game.
Spell count will be plenty here. You see Jessup down to 19, and Danny knows he's beat right away. This is not his first time here, and what's so interesting about this as he does concede the game, you can see the frustration. If he counters the Brainstorm, he wins the game. He did not counter the Brainstorm, and you can see him shaking his head. Caleb Scherer is going to win game number 1 here over Danny Jessup. Storm up a game here over Teamer Delver.
Really well played by Caleb in those situations. It certainly was a hand that had some problems that he had to overcome with it. Now, on Danny's side, you mentioned that counter on Brainstorm. It's a real close call, and to be fair, I do like some of the ways that Danny played it. He had to make a risk of whether or not he wanted to play. If he counters, then he's hoping that Caleb didn't draw land for the turn. If he lets it resolve, Caleb needs to draw Lotus Petal and land for that to punish Danny. I think he actually played around the right out. It unfortunately just didn't work this game.
Well, we'll take a look at the sideboards here for both players. We will start with Danny Jessup and his Pithing Needle, Sylvan Library, and Ancient Grudge, 2 Dismembers of Flusterstorm, 3 Pyroblast, 2 Submerge, a Vendilion Click, a Life from the Loam, and 2 copies of Rough Tumble. Things
only get tougher for Storm post board against these Teamer Delver decks. You see he gets an extra copy of Flusterstorm, which is very strong here. He also has a Vendilion Click, which we saw him really kind of get punished that game by not having a clock soon enough. Vendilion Click, the fact that it has a clock and Disruption together is exactly what Danny's looking for.
On the other side of things here for Caleb, he's got 2 Xantid Swarms, 2 Carpet of Flowers, 3 Abrupt Decays, 2 Chain of Vapors, 3 Disfigure, a Cabal Therapy, and Empty the Warrens, and a Tropical Island. Keep in mind, of course, players have access to each other's deck list. That's what they're both looking at right now. So how do you think Caleb will sideboard?
Well, the Storm sideboard's never that much of a secret. I think the technology that Caleb brought in, this is actually a addition to his own list for the weekend, as the 2 Carpet of Flowers. He normally does not run those. I am not positive that this is a matchup for Carpet of Flowers, but we'll see how he wants to go with this. I mean, I think Empty the Warrens is reasonable here. Because he knows there's no gotcha sideboard card. Chain of Vapor is a hit or miss. There's a lot of ways for Caleb to sideboard it, but I expect the sideboarding still to be light.
Well, those are the options there for both players. Now, we talk about how Caleb got to this particular tournament. It was by winning that Invitational last weekend in Las Vegas. And you get a couple things for winning Invitational. You get $10,000, which is pretty cool. You qualify for the Players' Championship, which he's currently 2-0 and up a game in. And you also get your likeness on a card. And Caleb wanted a Storm counter.
Beat me to it, but it couldn't have been a better guy.
And how here is his Storm counter. Of course, Caleb Scherer has a Storm counter for each spell played this turn. So for you Storm fanatics out there, and I'm talking to you, Bryant Cook, and everybody else, you now have a Storm counter available to you. A couple ways to go about getting this thing. All open participants, all classic participants on the SCG Tour next year, and all orders from StarCityGames.com beginning January 29th, starting at noon Eastern Time. $5 minimum order, either at our sales booth or online. It's awesome to be able to get Caleb out here, get this Storm token. Keep in mind, January 29th is our open in Columbus during the SCG Tour Season 1. Congrats to him, because, again, that win streak last weekend, unbelievable.
Yeah, another great win streak on him. Great art, once again, by Kristen Plesko. I've loved these tokens for the last 2 years. Positive correlation here with combo players and players wearing hats. It's like the in thing to do if all you do is jam combo decks.
Oh, you're a hat wearer as well.
It's true. That's actually, it's like the secret handshake of the Combo Society.
You each have your own different type of hat.
You all just wear hats, yeah.
Fair enough. Caleb Scherer, our Season 4 Invitational Champion. Congrats to him. And as we do learn a little bit more about him, because, again, for me, coming into this weekend, and everyone's making their picks on who you think's going to do well this weekend. It's always fun to make your selections. It's easy to pick Jacob Wilson, Brad Nelson, defending champion. For Caleb, again, the win streak that he is on, given Las Vegas last weekend and now here this weekend, I don't want to call him an underdog, because it's hard to call someone who's on this kind of a win streak an underdog.
I mean, it's one of those things that really kind of defies your general thoughts. You'd be like, oh, how good is this player? And at some point you have to just say, well, is anyone going to beat him? Like, when is this going to stop?
Yeah. He's not losing. He just keeps running winning.
To anyone.
Nimble Mongoose is where Jessup is going to start. Both players are going to keep their opening hands. A basic island is what Caleb will search up with the Polluted Delta as he falls down to 19.
Well, this turn 1 play, this is what Danny was lacking last game. Now, it's not Delver of Secrets, but it's the next best one.
Here's a Ponder. That will resolve. Caleb will take a look at the top couple of cards. We'll see what he wants to do with the Duress, the Gitaxian Probe, and Cabal Ritual. Those seem like goodies to me.
Good setup here for Caleb. Cheap rituals. Gitaxian Probe works well in Storm on so many levels. It's a free spell. That's great. The fact it's a cantrip, which is good. And then the knowledge of your opponent's hand, Storm uses it better than just about anyone.
Force of Will, the draw for Jessup. He's going to use this Tropical Island for something. It looks like it'll be a cantrip. It's a Ponder of his own. So he'll take a look at the top 3 cards here and see what he wants to do with them. For Jessup, that last game was a pretty tough one to lose. You know what your opponent's playing coming into the match. You find an opening hand with 3 Spell Piercers and a Force of Will, along with a land and a cantrip. You're going to keep it every single time. You're feeling pretty confident with your opening hand, and it's still a game that Caleb was able to work through all that permission.
I mean, Storm is very resilient. The fact that Caleb had the combo of Gitaxian Probe plus Cabal Therapy, I think, is what turned the tide for him. Danny's hand was very good against Storm, but he had a lot of cards with the same name, and that got to him.
It looks like Jessup will keep Force of Will, the draw. Here comes Nimble Mongoose, just in for 1. The follow-up is a Scalding Tarn, and Jessup will pass the turn back over to Scherer.
Yeah, Danny's building a great wall of permission here. Now, of course, it is vulnerable to discard effects, and that's how Storm fights back. But we have Pierce, 2 Force of Wills, a Stifle. It's a lot of great things to back up Nimble Mongoose.
Volcanic Island here from Caleb, and he'll just pass the turn back over to Jessup. We'll see if Jessup wants to sacrifice this fetch land or if he's happy with what he's drawing from the Ponder.
It's interesting. So Caleb actually has a Duress and had an Underground Sea, but he's opted not to Duress here, I believe because his hand is too weak to Wasteland to risk putting his Black Duel into play.
Jessup giving this a lot of thought. Will he sacrifice this Scalding Tarn in the upkeep, or does he want to draw what's coming from the Ponder? He knows what's coming.
So what Caleb will have to do is when he Duresses, so you're wondering, okay, if he's going to protect the sea that hard, what does Duress do? What he's planning to do is on his combo turn, he's going to start by ritualing and then use a spare black mana to Duress mid-turn. Now, there's some risk to that because if you ritual twice and say if you build a dark ritual into a Cabal ritual and then they counter your Cabal ritual, that's very bad. Mm-hmm. So he's giving up some efficiency, but I think it's correct for him to be playing around the Wasteland.
It looks like Pyroblast may have been the draw. Here comes the Mongoose just for 1 yet again. Scherer going to fall down to 17.
Yeah, what a counterspell wall Danny's building here. Pyroblast, Spell Pierce. He, in 1 turn, could cast Force of Will, Pyroblast, Spell Pierce, and Stifle. That is a ton to get through.
It's a probe.
Caleb's going to find out about it. And
yeah.
It's not what you want to see when you're on the combo side of things.
2 Force of Will, Spell Pierce, Stifle, Pyroblast. Can you beat this? You got through the counter wall last time, but I didn't have pressure in the last game.
There's 2 hard counters, 1 soft counter, and then a hard counter for your kill spell. That is rough. And they all have different names, so your therapies are not, there's no sweet plays like last game. The saving grace is that Danny's clock is very slow at the moment. Mm-hmm. We're ways off. As long as Caleb doesn't run cards into these counter spells, Mongoose is going to be a 1-1 for many turns. So Caleb could wait until he had a hand of something like Dark Ritual and maybe 2 Duresses or 2 Duresses and Therapy and just chop the hand apart and then go for it.
You saw Caleb sacrifice a Polluted Delta there saying, is this okay? Can I search up, probably a black source of mana like a basic swamp? Stifle took care of that. Polluted Delta was the draw there for Jessup. He doesn't want to play that and leak any information. And you see Scherer going to draw a copy of Underground Sea.
And look at that. One way to get a counterspell out of your opponent's hand is to crack a completely unimportant fetch land. And that Caleb got to trade Polluted Delta with Stifle is really a win.
Well, it looked important.
Yeah, it looked like he didn't have black man. Yep. I mean, who knew that he had 2 Underground Seas?
See, this is the difference when you get the opportunity to play Probe and when you don't. Probe does such a nice job of giving you information. Now Caleb can move forward accordingly. He's going to play an Infernal Tutor, and we'll see if this does resolve.
This is an Infernal Tutor for value. Caleb is doing a lot of work here of just baiting Danny to use. He wants Danny to use his counterspells in inopportune moments. This would be, I believe, Infernal Tutor just getting a ritual or getting a discard spell.
Mm-hmm. He's trying to power through that wall of counter magic just like he did in the first game. This time Danny's got pressure. It's just not significant pressure. Nimble Mongoose is just pecking away for 1.
Yeah, Infernal Tutor, we normally see it Hellbent in this deck. That's not what's happening right now. Caleb's using the first ability, where all he can search up is an additional copy of a card he already has.
Here's a Spell Pierce.
And Spell Pierce, this is another win. Caleb is trading unimportant cards for Danny's counter spells.
And the draw here for Jessup is a Delver of Secrets.
Well, that may force the issue a little bit. Delver, once it flips, I mean, turn 1 Delver is the card Caleb does not want to see. I mean, turn 4 Delver is the card that Caleb doesn't want to see.
Yeah, he never wants to see Delver on the other side of the table. That much is for sure. It's here now. We'll see if it's too late to the party or not.
Well, it will help. Mongoose was still a few turns off from becoming a 3/3.
Lion's Eye Diamond the draw. It could be go time right now.
Well, Caleb still knows about the Force of Will and Pyroblast. So he knows it's only 1 force he has to fight through. There's only 1 more card in Danny's hand.
Here's a copy of Duress. Danny going to toss his hand on the table. 2 Force of Wills, a Pyroblast, and a Polluted Delta. It's not a strong hand. Duress pokes a hole through this very easily.
And how surgical is this of Caleb? So we had a hand that looked unbeatable. And let's recount what just happened here. Polluted Delta traded with Stifle. Infernal Tutor traded with Spell Pierce. And Duress took Force of Will and left Danny without a blue card for his second force. So he got rid of all the counter magic with nothing.
And if your Storm opponent is reaching for the mana counters and the Storm counter and casting Dark Ritual, you're probably dead.
If they're doing that right after they've seen your hand, and then they're just, that is all sorts of bad news.
You felt coming into this matchup that Storm was going to get the job done based off of a lot of Caleb's experience. And in this particular game, on one side of the table, as you see another Cabal Ritual, you see Caleb, someone who has clearly played through a lot of counter magic walls from Delver. On the other side, Danny a little unsure of what to counter in certain situations.
Surgical here. I mean, look, and then Caleb, his whole hand had no blue cards for the blast.
Yep. It's a Past in Flames, and Danny is going to concede the game right away. The Dark Petition searches up a Past in Flames, lets him go absolutely nuts. And Caleb Scherer is going to win this match over Danny Jessup, 2-0. Storm will take care of Teamer Delver. And for Caleb, who 3-3 at Las Vegas last weekend, had to win every single match that he played for the rest of that tournament to be here. He did that, and he's won his first 3 matches this weekend. He's just locked up his group, which means he'll, at the very least, get to play Standard tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll see him on Sunday. You can't underrate just how good Storm is in the hands of a competent pilot. And Caleb just putting that on display. I think some inexperience in the matchup for Danny Jessup. I mean, his play was very solid, but I think Caleb, it's clear that Caleb has played this match 10, 20 times as many times as Danny has.
Oh, absolutely.